Hello, Professor Mueller and respective TAs. This is my submission for CSE 564 Visualization Lab 2, wherein we study dimensionality reduction and k-means clustering. The dataset that I am using is the credit card dataset. So before performing any kind of dimensionality reduction and k-means clustering, I am performing certain kind of standardization on my data. And that standardization I am performing is basically for every column of every row of the data. I am subtracting its value from the mean and then dividing with its standard deviation. And after that, I'm also removing the columns that are not required, such as the customer ID from the data set, because it's not required for the computation. So now let's move on to the plots that I have plotted for this assignment. So these are the following plots that I have plotted for this assignment. So let's start with the generate scree plot function. As you can see, I have calculated the eigen values from the PCA object using the explained variance ratio that gives the percentage of the variance for each of the component as shown here. As you can see, the curve elbows at number of components equal to 6. We can clearly see that out of 7 components, 6 components are more than enough to explain 75% of the variance in the data, and 10 components are more than enough to explain more than 90% of the variance in the data. Next, let's move on to showing the principal components, aka the PCA vectors in a scattered biplot, but they are unclustered. So this is how the top 2 PCA scatter biplot display looks like. One thing to observe here is that given that the data I have used is very tightly bounded between its columns, it is because of this that the PCA1, PC1 and PC2 components when plotted do not show any visible cluster difference between them. There are some outliers visible as well. However, they indicate that they are not closely related to the clustered set of points. We also see that the points are somewhat parallel to the x-axis. This shows that the principal component 1 has more weight compared to the principal component 2. Now let's move on to the next plot of showing the top 4 attributes with the highest squared sum of PCA loadings. Here I have used Bootstrap CSS frameworks to design this elegant table inside a model. Because the size of my data set is around 1500 rows, it is because of this reason that you can see so much of the data associated with these 4 attributes. By PCA loadings, I mean the correlation between the attributes and the main loadings, which is identified using the squared sum of the loadings. Now let's move on to the matrix plot of these 4 attributes. As can be seen from this plot, all of these 4 attributes are symmetrical across the right diagonal. And this is very obvious because both the x-axis and y-axis are same, and that is why they are symmetrical across the right diagonal. Also, it can be inferred that these 4 attributes are tightly bound with each other, and this would be more evident after the k-means clustering, as there are no crystal clear clusters seen here. Now let's move on to the plot of finding the optimal number of clusters using k-means clustering algorithm in conjunction with elbow finding. So this is how the plot for elbow finding looks like. So I have plotted this graph wherein the cluster sizes range from 1 to 20, and the metric used is the average within sum of squares. As suggested by the plot and as per the elbow finding, the optimal number of clusters for this credit card dataset is 5. This can be obtained using the need locator API from Python. Now let's move on to the biplot and the matrix plot with this clustering information. So this is how the scattered biplot looks like, wherein the PCA points, wherein the principal component points have been colored with respect to the different clusters. This is how the top 4 attributes matrix plot looks like, which have been colored with the clusters, Again, it can be seen from both these plots that even after clustering, the clusters are not visible clearly. And this indicates that these 4 variables are tightly bound. So as a conclusion, I can say that initially my data was 17 dimensional, but now I can reduce my dimension space from 17 to 4 attributes, because these 4 attributes are closely related to each other, and they explain most of the variance that is present in the data. This is the complete assignment. Thank you.